All right, so you're ready to dive deep, right?
Yeah.
Really get a grip on what's shaping the future. Well, strap in, because today we're tackling Mariana Salzman's The New Megatrends. It's, well, it's about seeing clearly in this crazy age of disruption. And by the end of this, you'll have a roadmap for what's ahead.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Salzman's approach is she doesn't just pull predictions out of thin air. She goes back, way back to the turn of the millennium. Like, remember Y2K?
Oh yeah, the whole world freaking out about computers crashing.
Right. So she uses that as a starting point and traces how things have unfolded since then, up to now, to give us a more grounded view of where we might be heading, all the way to 2038, in fact.
2038, huh? That's a pretty specific year. We'll get to that. But first, for those of you who might not be familiar, Mariana Salzman is a big deal in the world of trend forecasting and communication. She's lived and worked all over the globe, observing, analyzing, and, well, predicting how things change.
And she doesn't shy away from her hits and misses. I mean, she called the rise of influencers, the erosion of privacy, the whole climate change backlash.
But she also admits there were some swings and misses, like that whole Chindia idea combining China and India as one economic force didn't quite pan out that way, did it?
Nope. And remember, ages without stages. That idea that age wouldn't define us as much anymore. Well, turns out generations still matter, even if the lines blur a bit.
So yeah, even the pros get it wrong sometimes. But that's part of the process, right? Learning, adapting, refining your understanding as things unfold. Which brings us back to 2038. What's so special about that year anyway?
Well, it's the year of the Y2038 problem. Basically, it's Y2K all over again, but potentially worse. Some older computer systems might not be able to handle dates after January 19, 2038. It's like their internal calendars run out of space.
So another potential digital meltdown. And Salzman uses this as a marker, a way to examine how digital technology has shaped our lives over 4 decades. From Y2K to Y2038, it's a pretty wild ride.
Totally. And she sets the stage with 4 big observations about the world as it is now. The first one is together, yet apart. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? We're more connected than ever through technology, but we're also increasingly isolated in our own little bubbles.
It's like we curate our own realities, right?
Yeah.
News feeds, social media, entertainment. It's all tailored to our individual tastes, which is great for convenience, but
But it can also create echo chambers where we only hear what we want to hear, reinforcing our existing beliefs and shutting out other perspectives.
and that can lead to the second observation, massive economic inequality. Salzman points out that the gap between the haves and have-nots has been widening for decades.
Since the mid-70s, in fact. And this isn't just about money. It's about access to opportunities, healthcare, education, even just a decent quality of life.
Which feeds into the third observation, the rise of the me-centric worldview.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about personal branding, individual achievement, putting yourself first.
It's almost ingrained in us from a young age, right? Hustle, stand out, build your brand. And while there's nothing wrong with ambition, this hyper-individualism can have downsides.
Like what?
Well, it can make it harder to work together to address collective challenges. It can erode empathy and a sense of shared responsibility.
But here's where it gets interesting. Salzman's fourth observation is about the increasing importance of shared experiences and collaboration. It's a counter trend to all that me-first stuff.
Exactly. We saw it during the pandemic with people coming together to support each other. But it goes deeper than that. There's a growing recognition that many of the problems we face require collective action, not just individual solutions.
So 4 big observations setting the scene. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Salzman's 10 trends shaping the future. And the first one is a bit of a downer, eroding trust in government.
Yeah, she sees democracy being questioned, power-hungry politicians, a yearning for tradition that often ignores historical complexities. She even brings up a prediction from John Naisbitt, who back in the day thought Europe would play a bigger role in global governance.
But things haven't quite turned out that way, have they?
Nope. China's rise is a major factor, of course. And then there's the growing influence of super wealthy individuals and tech giants who are shaping the future according to their own agendas.
Which brings us to trend number 2, the New World Order. It's all about shifting power dynamics, and understanding those shifts is crucial for navigating the future, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing the interplay between nation-states, economic powerhouses, and these tech behemoths that are increasingly calling the shots.
And then we have hate in the ether, which is just as unsettling as it sounds. Salzman argues that anxiety and digital technology have created a breeding ground for online hate and hostility.
It's become almost normalized, right? People hiding behind anonymous profiles, spewing negativity. And it's not just online anymore. It spills over into the real world, fueling violence against minorities. And groups like white supremacists are experts at exploiting this toxic environment.
It's a sobering reminder of the dark side of our digital age. And then there's the disappearing middle. This one's about the growing polarization in politics and society.
It's like the middle ground is shrinking, and people are retreating to their respective corners, more extreme in their views. Salzman even quotes Margaret Thatcher and Martin Luther King Jr. to illustrate how the middle is often seen as an obstacle to progress, regardless of which side you're on.
So less common ground, more division, fun times. And then we have the rise of tribes. Salzman suggests that these groups, often virtual, might become even more important than national identity.
It makes sense in a way. In a world where traditional structures are breaking down, people are finding community and belonging in these niche online groups. It's about shared values, interests, even ideologies.
It's almost like a return to tribalism, but in a digital age. And speaking of the digital age, get ready for the end of privacy. Salzman argues that ubiquitous surveillance is becoming the norm.
Think about it. CCTV cameras are everywhere. AI is being used to track our movements and even our emotions. And in China, they've taken it to a whole new level. Salzman even suggests we might see mandatory ID bracelets that monitor everything we do.
It's kind of a chilling thought, isn't it, being constantly watched and analyzed? But Salzman does offer a glimmer of hope. She thinks digital detox might become a status symbol, a way for the elite to signal their detachment from constant surveillance.
It's an interesting thought, like disconnecting becomes a luxury. But even then, can you truly escape the digital panopticon?
It's a good question. And the polarization we're seeing isn't limited to politics and social issues. It's also extending to science, which brings us to the polarization of science.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? We've seen incredible scientific advancements like the rapid development of COVID vaccines. But at the same time, there's this growing distrust of science, fueled by misinformation and conspiracy theories.
Salzman links this back to things like the debunked MMR vaccine study and the rise of the anti-vax movement. It's a reminder that even science, which is supposed to be based on evidence and reason, can be caught up in the whirlwind of polarization.
Absolutely. And she also brings up Stephen Hawking's concerns about genetic engineering and how it could further exacerbate inequality. Imagine a world where the wealthy can literally enhance themselves while the rest are left behind.
It's almost like a sci-fi dystopia, but it's a possibility we need to consider. Okay, moving on to redistribution of populations. Salzman observes a shift away from expensive cities, driven by remote work and the virtualization of our lives.
But that's creating new pressures, right? People are moving to more affordable areas, driving up housing costs, and potentially creating tension with existing residents. And then there's the continued growth of megacities in other parts of the world, places like Shenzhen, Jakarta, Lagos. These massive urban centers are becoming the new hubs of population and economic activity.
So it's a mixed bag. Some spreading out, some clustering together, and then there's entertainment, which is undergoing a radical transformation thanks to AI.
Yeah, Salzman argues that AI is basically hijacking our minds, creating entertainment that's so finely tuned to our pleasure centers that it's becoming almost addictive. And as the world gets more complex and stressful, we're more likely to seek refuge in these digital escapes.
It's almost like a feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
The more stressed we get, the more we crave these highly stimulating, personalized forms of entertainment. And the more we consume, the more our brains get rewired.
It's a bit of a scary thought, and it raises questions about what it means to be truly present and engaged in the real world when these digital distractions are so readily available.
It's a challenge we all face. And then we have gender, which is another area of rapid evolution. Salzman highlights the growing acceptance of gender as a social construct, particularly among younger generations.
You know, she mentions that a significant portion of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ plus hara, which really speaks to this shift in understanding. But of course, there's pushback from groups who hold more traditional views on gender, which creates another point of tension in society.
It's a reminder that social change is rarely smooth or straightforward. Okay, so those are the initial 10 trends. But Salzman doesn't stop there. She delves into money and the rise of cashless economies.
Which is tied to the whole universal basic income debate. If jobs are increasingly automated, how do we ensure people can still make a living? And then there's the whole cryptocurrency explosion with Bitcoin, NFTs, the metaverse. It's a whole new financial landscape that's still evolving rapidly.
And she doesn't shy away from the potential pitfalls either, like China's crackdown on crypto. It shows that governments are still figuring out how to regulate this new Wild West of finance.
Absolutely. And then there's climate, which looms large over everything else. Salzman sees a move towards sustainability, phasing out combustion engines, embracing clean energy. But is it happening fast enough?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Mm.
And she highlights the role of younger generations, like Greta Thunberg's, who are demanding action. They're growing up with the consequences of climate change, so they're not going to just sit back and wait for solutions.
Exactly. And businesses are starting to catch on. They realize they need to cater to consumers who are more environmentally conscious. So we're seeing innovations like sustainable fashion, ecotourism, even those overnight trains as an alternative to flying.
It's a reminder that even amidst all the disruption, there's hope and innovation. And speaking of disruption, let's talk about how we shop, because that's changing too.
Yeah, the traditional shopping mall is on the decline. Salzman sees them being replaced by mixed-use developments, smaller living spaces, and a shift towards experiences rather than just accumulating stuff.
It's like the Marie Kondo effect, right? Tidying up our lives, both physically and mentally. But at the same time, e-commerce is getting even more sophisticated.
Right.
They're using all sorts of tricks to keep us engaged and spending.
Social media, gamification, personalized recommendations, it's all designed to tap into our desires and keep us clicking buy now.
And finally, Salzman explores non-luxury goods, which is about how our definition of luxury is changing.
It used to be all about fancy cars, designer clothes, extravagant vacations. But now it's shifting towards things like uncrowded spaces, a slower pace of life, access to nature, personalized healthcare. It's like a yearning for authenticity and a respite from the constant noise and stimulation of modern life.
It's almost like a return to simpler values, but with a high-tech twist.
Hmm.
So there you have it, Salzman's 10 trends, plus a few bonus ones. But it's not just about identifying these trends, it's about understanding the underlying forces driving them. And she calls these the Great Bifurcation and the Great Reboot.
The Great Bifurcation is essentially about how we're becoming increasingly polarized, despite being more connected than ever. It's the widening gap between left and right, rich and poor, young and old. And it's not just happening on a societal level, it's happening within families, communities, even within ourselves.
It's like we're being pulled in opposite directions, and it's creating a lot of tension and conflict. And then there's the Great Reboot, which is about a yearning for something better, a desire for more community, fairness, and a sense of purpose.
It was amplified by the pandemic, which forced many of us to reevaluate our priorities. It's like we hit the pause button and asked ourselves, what really matters? What kind of world do we want to create?
It's about recognizing that the old ways of doing things aren't working, and that we need to find new solutions. And Salzman points to some hopeful signs within this reboot: the rise of allyship, a willingness to challenge the status quo, a pushback against misinformation.
It's like people are waking up and saying, enough is enough. We need to treat each other with respect. We need to be more mindful of our impact on the planet, and we need to hold those in power accountable.
It's a reminder that even in the face of disruption, there's a possibility for positive change. And finally, Salzman talks about the embrace of real as a reaction to the artificiality of modern life.
Yeah, it's about craving authenticity, connection with nature, mindfulness, a slower pace. She even quotes Arundhati Roy, who says, "We can either carry the corpses of our dead with us, or we can choose to move lightly towards a new world."
It's a powerful image, right? Letting go of the old, embracing the new, even if it's uncertain. And as we wrap up, Salzman brings us back to Y2K. Remember all that fear and anxiety? Well, it turned out to be a bit of a non-event, at least in terms of the technological meltdown that was predicted.
But she argues that it was a missed opportunity. The world came together to prepare for Y2K, there was cooperation and information sharing, but we didn't learn the lessons from that experience, and when the real crisis hit, the pandemic, we were caught off guard.
We weren't prepared for the scale of misinformation, the lack of global coordination, the economic and social upheaval. It's a sobering reminder that the challenges we face are complex and interconnected, and that simple solutions are often elusive.
But it's also a call to action. We can't just sit back and wait for the future to happen to us. We need to be informed, engaged, and willing to work together to create the world we want to see.
So there you have it. Marian Salzman's The New Megatrends. It's a lot to take in, but we hope this deep dive has given you a clearer understanding of the forces shaping our future. And now, we're going to leave you with one final thought to ponder. In a world facing increasing polarization, technological disruption, and ecological uncertainty, what aspects of your own life do you think will be most affected by 2038? And what choices can you make today to navigate this complex and ever-changing landscape? It's a big question, but it's one worth asking. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.